Well, good day, and welcome to Eng 299. I'm Gord Winkle, Director and Chair for the David and Joan Lynch School of Engineering Safety and Risk Management. And it is my pleasure today to present a two-part lecture, given that we're in a remote format, and it will very much cycle in on the subjects of professional ethics and safety. And in the first part, we're going to talk about this concept called sustainability, and we're going to put this science of risk management to work. In the second part, we're going to talk about engineering responsibility, and we'll put this thing called an engineer's survival guide to work. All this in support of your co-op experience. All right, well, let's start. I'm going to take you back. That's right, I'm going to take you back to when I started. As you are sitting remotely, albeit, but otherwise being part of our University of Alberta engineering faculty, so I did in 1973 start my degree in engineering. I know that dates me a little, it's been a while. However, it was a fine university, got a great degree, and actually stayed on for my master's. And I'm going to reflect back from that point on to when I then started into the workplace. Yeah, that's right. I come to you from major industry. I worked in northern Alberta in an industry called the oil sands, a pioneering effort for us to mine oil-laden deposits and to basically extract bitumen and upgrade it into synthetic crude oil. Now, I started as a young mechanical engineer, excited and working on the improvement of the mining equipment of the day. Then moved into operations management in mining, became maintenance and operations manager, and then on to mineral processing, where as a general manager, we got to see how that part of the industry worked, and then moved further into my career and became vice president for the Aurora operation, where we had mining and mineral processing combined. Well, on that particular journey, the dimensions that we talked about earlier came into play in a number of ways. And first of all, let's just stand back. That's right, let's stand back and look at you. If we were in a room together, I would simply be saying something to the effect of, I'm excited to see the future designers and leaders in society, because that's what you are. That's right. You know, from a design point of view, you're getting an excellent education here at the University of Alberta, as we teach you these specialized aspects of knowledge in whatever engineering discipline you're in. And then moving beyond design, and believe me, this is an important facet of where we are as engineers. We do build the future after all. But I will tell you also that as you move forward from that, you will also get into the dimension of leadership. That's right. Many of you will become leaders of corporations, institutions, associations, and agencies. And either through your design efforts or in a more formal leadership role, you will work to advance your career to the benefit of those organizations that enjoy your services. Well, that's a little bit kind of my journey. I did start into the technical side of our profession and then moved into leadership, where I now had to support people and basically had to work through the efforts of others. On that journey, I'll tell you that there was an evolution that occurred. That's right. You see, there was this concept that organizations needed to deliver on more than just one front. And so let me tell you a little bit how that evolved. What we started to understand is that we work at the pleasure of society. That's right. Whatever endeavor or project or enterprise that we're in is basically there to deliver against a set of performance standards and to meet certain qualifications of integrity. The way that we reframe this is we say that our license to operate, our permission to do these things, is judged in the court of public opinion. That's right. Whatever society holds as a perception of what it is we do determines whether we get to continue doing it and enjoy their support. And we call this the sustainability imperative. An imperative, that means there's a call to action here. This is not something to be taken lightly. Our future depends on it. And so, given this understanding, I can tell you as a young engineer working in the oil sands, our first dimension that we had to deliver on was economic performance. That's right, industry leadership and showing performance in this dimension was critical. In my business, there were two simple parameters that we used to define how successful we were in this dimension. First was, how much did it cost to produce? That's right. What was the cost that was required to run our operation? The second parameter was, how much did we produce? In this case, how many tons did we mine? But more importantly, how many barrels actually came out of our plant as synthetic crude that was ready to go to market? And so we had cost, and we had the number of barrels, and this so-called unit cost, dollars per barrel, determined our financial performance, and that would go up against the world price of dollars per barrel. And the margin in between would determine our return to investors that in fact supported this operation as owners. Well, those were heady days, and we worked very hard to get our production in the right direction and to do it in a cost-efficient way. And then it happened. I can never forget that in the mid-1980s and a few years thereafter, this word called the environment started to play a much more prominent role in how we ran our business. Now, we did things and supported environmental performance, but in fact, the standards for environmental performance started to change, and when you looked at the corporations of the day, we started to see that the prominence and importance of environmental leadership was very much built into the fabric of corporations. So much so that when I watched corporations, we suddenly had vice presidents now of safety, health, and environment. That's right. They were actually that focused that executive portfolios were designed to basically support leadership in environmental performance. Well, some years later, in the late 80s and I'll say the early 1990s, there was another dimension that came into the forefront. You know, it wasn't enough for corporations to move into a community or be surrounded by a group of communities and to simply perform in the dimensions that I've just talked about. When you basically moved in the neighborhood, there was also expectations for things like educational opportunities, employment opportunities, infrastructure in the community. I can tell you that when we went to Fort McMurray in the early days of Syncrude, it was a pretty fledgling town. That's right. And so for an operation the size of Syncrude to begin, we had to, in fact, support a lot of infrastructure development. It just wasn't there. And so we had to build our capability in the community. And that meant supplying housing. It meant roads. It meant bridges. It meant arenas. And, you know, in the dollars of the day, our initial investment was about $350 million, which if I translate it kind of in the dollars that are more current, that was kind of like $1 billion investment in community capacity. Well, as you can see then, these were pretty important dimensions, and right through my career, I certainly supported these. And then in 2010, after being a guest lecturer in the engineering faculty here at the University of Alberta, I retired and took on the position that I introduced earlier, which was to grow the program now into a school of risk management. Well, and operating as a school from the university, not only do we provide instruction as we're doing today, but further, we work with a various suite of industries and the university itself to advance risk management. And risk management has always been important. In Syncrude, I can tell you, as we'll see later, it very much underpinned our social license to operate. And now, operating from the university, what we start to understand is that risk management and safety, as developed from working with all these industries, needs to be considered as the fourth leg of sustainability. The so-called triple bottom line corporations that excel in finance, environment, and community capacity now need to have a fourth leg on that stool, and that is risk management and safety. Let me explain. If we're in the railway business, and in fact, we start to have downgrading incidents like derailments at great frequency, and further, if said derailments cause explosion and tragically even fatality and mass evacuations of communities, or lead to spilling of crude into environmentally sensitive waters, this greatly erodes our performance, both economically, from an environmental point of view, and in terms of our community support. And continued failure in safety and risk management means that when we want to build that next railway line or terminal in the vicinity of a community, it's not going to go well if we don't deliver on safety and risk management. And so, remember that underpinning the sustainability imperative is excellence in risk management. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So remember, the sustainability equation, the so-called triple bottom line corporations that you may hear about, excel in industry leadership in terms of economic return. They deliver on protecting the environment, and they very much support their community capacity and build that capacity over time. And now, what we understand is supporting all of this is excellence in safety and risk management. Well, let's move on. Engineers, like yourselves, are in the business of risk management. That's right. In every engineering discipline, safety and risk management is a core competency requirement for a successful career. Now, many of you are going to be in very different roles, and there might even be a temptation to say, well, how does risk management fit into things like maybe research and development? You made the pitch for operations. What about consulting? No matter what dimension or what role that you take in the field of engineering, every one of your decisions will involve risk and the management thereof. And if you enter the project world as an example, you know what projects are, right? Those are those things that always come in on time and on budget. You'll get that challenge. And essentially, as we go through projects, right from the very start when we have a concept, moving to basic and then detailed engineering and then commissioning and completions and then startup and operations. Wow, it's a real journey, a complex journey, but a very successful one if we apply risk management throughout every stage of that project development. Let's go into the executive offices of one of the largest market cap companies in the world. And let's visit the leaders of that corporation. And we're going to talk about Rex Tillerson. That's right, the former chair and CEO of ExxonMobil. Rex one day was introducing and giving a bit of a primer to an upstream technology conference for his firm. And he talked about, and I'll do a bit of a role play here, he talked about, going home on the weekend before. And in his words, the family asked, well, what does the chair and CEO of ExxonMobil actually do? What do you do? Shocking, isn't it? Well, I always tell them the same thing. I'm in the business of risk management. That's right. I'm in the business of risk management. And every surveillance engineer, every geologist, every technologist, every manager, superintendent, and executive in this firm are in the business of risk management. And not living up to our responsibilities in risk management is tantamount to accepting harm, loss, downgrading incidents and asset loss, destruction of the environment, and would reflect an abdication of our responsibility to operate as this firm successfully into the future. Wow, what a fantastic statement. Rex Tillerson, as the lead of this corporation, sets a tone at the top that makes it very clear that risk management is fundamental to his operation and successfully moving that into the future. So let's talk about our engineering practice. Let's talk about that we are part of this risk management equation. And when you look at the list that's in front of us here, yeah, you figured out now in your education that engineering is pretty technologically complex. You bet. And wonderful that you can be part of this university experience to hone your skills in these areas. The second part is that, there's a big impact here on society. That's right. We build the future. We build the future. And so society, in fact, benefits from our efforts in that regard. But as we are starting to see, those efforts also have to meet a higher standard. And in this regard, we talk about this thing called ethical obligation to society at large. And so as the title of this lecture suggested, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about ethics. And so I'm going to ask you, sitting there now, listening to this lecture, how would you define ethics? What's a simple way for us to define ethics? Well, I've got a 180-page book on ethics. Wow, this is a real page turner. Do any of you suffer from insomnia? Because let me tell you, you buy this book and you try to get through it in an evening, we'll cure you. However, if we distill that wonderful body of knowledge into its most simplistic forms, ethics is about doing the right thing. That's right. And maybe let's exemplify that. What are you looking at here? Well, these are the courthouse steps. Now, what's the simple litmus test for seeing if we're doing right by ethics? Well, let's suppose you make a decision. How do you feel about that decision? Can you stand on these courthouse steps? Can you, under one arm, have a media person, and under your underarm, a family member like your mother, and can you then stand and be proud of your decision? And if you can't look in each direction and fulfill that kind of a test, you know what? You better stand back and reconsider. Ethics is hard and it's complex and there's lots of legs to it. And sometimes we get it wrong. And when we do that, we've got to learn from that and move forward. Ethics, doing the right thing. Well, let's unpack that a little bit more. The first pillar of ethics is, as you probably would guess, the risk management side, the health and safety of the public, which is basically then protected as we move through our endeavors. And then there's more pillars. There's understanding our limitations in terms of competence, our behaviors in terms of honesty and integrity, and understanding the laws that govern the different aspects that we might be working on, and finally supporting our profession. That's right, the honor and dignity of our profession's reputation. But I need to tell you that, first and foremost, in all of these pillars is the first one. That's right. In any enterprise or endeavor, in anything that we undertake to do that benefits society, we must do it with the mind of protecting the safety of those that we touch with our efforts. This is first and most paramount. And so let's get back now to public expectations for us as engineers. I'd like you to look through this list that's in front of you here now. And I think you'd agree these are all pretty reasonable expectations, right? Cost-effective performance, things that work in our interest, again, that protection of safety. We want the best and up-to-date that technology can offer, and underpinning that, again, ethical practice. Well, let's move this forward. We actually, in our society here, have the privilege, that's right, the privilege of self-governance as an engineering profession. By now, this word APIGA is no stranger to you. And as part of our engineering association, we enjoy the ability to develop standards of practice that very much satisfy ethics and some of the other public expectations that we talked about earlier. And this is indeed a privilege. And that's earned, that's right, that privilege is earned by delivering through excellence in engineering in all of our endeavors, as per the codes and practices that we come up with here. Failure to deliver on this would erode that social contract. That would erode our sustainability, if you will, as a profession. And you would have others, non-engineers, starting then to take control over how we could move forward. Not necessarily a desirable future when those not in the practice start to set the regulation and framework. And so this is wonderful. As engineers, we can in fact set the highest standards with the expectation that we deliver on them. And again, ethics is a very important complement of this. And even now, as students working through your degree, you do have, by this profession, an expectation that you will perform in an ethical manner. And this is defined by a code of ethics. Now, codes of ethics, they provide guidance, but they're a pretty dynamic set of principles in terms of guidance, and the complexity of every situation is not covered in every detail, and it can't be. It's not practical. And so, yes, they are dynamic. They require judgment. They require critical thinking. And of course, if you run into difficulty there, we'll support you. But very importantly, remember that in society, we have also different opinions and different perceptions, and they change over time. And so we have to keep pace as a profession for what society expects as performance from our profession, hence the dynamic nature of them. One way to kind of check in on how we're doing in this dimension is to actually look historically at areas that, have caused us challenge. This is about learning the hard way. These are things that, if they go wrong, detract then from our license to operate. I've got quite a few dimensions here, but, well, let's walk into this and let's explore a few of these. Let's explore this thing called conflict of interest. All right. Guess what? You've finished university and you've joined a firm, and your technical expertise has earned you a position whereby you are now responsible to procure the next large run of piping for our plant. This is a big order, and it's going to require good quality control and engineering judgment on the product, but also, of course, it's going to have to be commercially competitive. And so here you are, and you've got a number of vendors that are going to supply pipe, and they're bidding for the opportunity to work with you. One of them comes forward one day and comes in your office. Well, hi, I'm from Company X, and we supply piping at high quality and high volume, and you know what? We'd really like to show that to you. And so why don't you and your significant other come down to our operation in the south part of the country here. We'll put you up in the finest hotels. We'll show you our finest golf courses. The cuisine there is wonderful. And we'll give you an all-expense-paid trip and really get to know you. And, of course, we would very much then like your consideration moving forward as we bid for your business. Are you going to take the trip? Oh, this is hard. Can you imagine? Won't this be wonderful? Don't do it. Don't do it. Can you imagine, after awarding of a contract, when others, unsuccessful, then learn to find that you had this special treatment? What does the integrity of that award and decision look like now? Let's go into a different dimension. Let's talk about this thing called loyalty and confidentiality. You're an engineer. You work for a firm, and you understand and are party to the next technological advance that's going to propel this firm forward ahead of any other enterprise, and it's a game changer. It's wonderful, and you're right in there, and you understand it. And it's exciting, and now it gets even more exciting. You're approached by another firm that plays in the same space, and they come forward with the following. Well, hi. Understand that, you're working in this particular area, and guess what? This is a good day for you. We want you to work for our firm. That's right. And you know what? We'll double your salary. And you bring with you the expertise that you've developed in this other firm, and let's put it to work, and we'll put our resource behind it, and we'll lead this charge. How'd you like to come and work with us? We can't wait to get the benefit of your expertise and knowledge. Don't join. I know, this sounds really attractive, but wait a minute. Have you signed confidentiality agreements and non-disclosure agreements? Or in the absence of them, is there an expectation that you do, in fact, deliver on that? This ethics area is pretty tough. That's right. But remember, you're never alone. If you're on those steps and it doesn't feel right, get guidance. See your mentors. See your association. Take instruction from our code. Talk to people who you respect and who show integrity, and lean on their support. And you'll navigate these waters well. Well, that's kind of the end of part one. And so what we're going to do is take a little break here. And in part 2, we'll get on a little bit more into, well, what are our responsibilities and how can we live those out? And we've got a tool called the Engineer's Survival Guide to help with that. We'll see you soon, and bye for now.